Good afternoon, Malaysia, and thank you very much for staying with us right here on Bernama TV. On The Nation this week, we once again walk through topics that are trending in the news this week in Malaysia and also outside Malaysia. There's a lot happening in the news, especially with the talk about SOSMA this week and what happened. Also, a lot of good things happening, especially for Bernama. Senator Dr. Ratnam, she received the Lifetime Achievement Award. Today, we didn't get to speak, but hopefully we'll be talking about that. To our discussion this week, Peter NICOLL, Managing Partner for Counter-Risk Consultancy Malaysia, Berhad. And then we also have EIZAZ, AZHAR, the Managing Director of 7W Associates, and Nigel Wong, who's the Treasurer of MATTA, which is an acronym for Malaysian Association of Travel and Tour. They're here to walk through the news this week. Guys, good to have you in this week. A lot's been happening in the news. Now, I'm just going to throw this out there, and I just want to know how you guys reacted. So, saying if you do a test at home now, you do an RTK test, or what we call what's known as a lateral assay. You do one of those saliva tests, and you find out you're positive. Do you know what happens next? I'll start with someone who's never had it before. Let's start with Nigel. Hello?
Nigel, you're on mute.
Hey, Gerard, yeah.
Seem to be having a bit of problem with that. We'll try to get Nigel on. Is EIZAZ on? We kind of got all three of them on freeze mode at the moment. If anyone's in, please come in and join in the conversation. We seem to be having a little lag with internet connectivity this afternoon. Nigel, can you hear me now? Would you be able to come in?
Yes, can you hear me, Gerard? I can sort of pick up.
Right. We still seem to be having a bit of a problem with you. Let's go to EIZAZ. EIZAZ, can you hear me, EIZAZ?
I can hear bits and pieces.
Okay, so you find out, you do a test and you find out that you're positive. What happens next? A lot of us still grapple with that. What's it like? What would you do first? Right. Okay, we're still trying to get the guys back. For some reason, we don't have the guys back. So let's very quickly go through what's happening in the news. And until we can get a strong connectivity, we'll speak to the guys. In the meantime, so SOSMA, the Security Offences Special Measures Act 2012, arrest, which focuses on arrest without warrant or reason, was much talked about this week in Parliament. The other news is Bahasa Melayu, should it be the second language of ASEAN? That's another question the Prime Minister has asked, and they're pushing for that. In the meantime, what we're going to try to do is try to get the boys back on. We seem to be having connectivity problems, and we're going to be talking about full border reopening. So come April 1st, we're going to be opening our borders. Anyone coming in from Singapore will not have to test. They can just walk into the country. And also we're going to open to the rest of the world. So there'll be people coming into Malaysia at this point. So what do we do then? How are we going to deal with this as we move forward? That's going to be another thing. But hey, guys, welcome back. I was there, lost for words for a while. Okay, Nigel, we'll get back to you. So saying if you got COVID now, you found out you got COVID and you're at home, what do you do?
Well, actually, I had a bit of a scare recently. I thought it was COVID. I think I had a viral throat infection. I took 1 million tests, figuratively speaking, and all the testing to indicate negative. But there's always this thing at the back of your mind thinking, I've got a sore throat, I must be COVID positive, So I did the best thing I could. I basically told everybody that I wasn't available, rescheduled all my meetings, and I spent a few days in relative peace and quiet, to be very honest. But look, the real story was that I was a bit worried. but I think I just treated it like a normal flu, and eventually it got better. But till today, I don't really know if I did get COVID-19 or not, or if it was truly a different sort of infection. Hard to tell.
Right. Well, interesting, but I think EIZAZ can give us a little bit more on this, because EIZAZ, we've seen quite a bit in the past week. I don't know if I should divulge anything, but...
Well, unfortunately, I have actually been diagnosed with COVID. I have caught the virus over the past 7 days or so. I am finishing up my 10-day quarantine. And the symptoms are not mild. So I don't know what this is. It could be the BA2 variant, it could be the old Delta variant, but whatever it is, I have been triple boosted. I have three times vaccination. And it kind of got to me. So it came with some symptoms, and I didn't know what they were. I took an RTK, there was no result. The symptoms got worse. I took another RTK, still no result, and I said, you know what, I'm going to get a PCR. And so I took that PCR, it came back, and it was indeed positive. And I immediately just shut myself in quarantine, everything, I suppose. Yeah, just weather the storm a bit.
But I guess, looking back from where we came from 2 years ago, I guess people are more relaxed when they talk about it. Even when they receive news of them being diagnosed with COVID, people are a lot more relaxed, and that's a step forward into us moving into endemicity. Now, this is a seg into my next topic, which I've picked for the day. And I want to talk about us opening up on April 1st. Now, we talk about endemicity and moving into an endemic phase, but there's something that's been here for a very long time, and we need to get rid of it as we open our country: endemic mediocrity. I think that's something we've been, it's always been that, okay lah, boleh lah, tidak apa lah, let's go with it, let's roll with it. I think that mindset in Malaysia has changed, Pete.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we still have, fortunately, we still have a number of really good regulations in place. Your face masks, social distancing, the check-in app, all of those things. So yeah, we have things in place. We need to just ensure that we make sure people continue to follow those. If we just open up like other countries have done, what we're seeing in those countries now is a retrograde step back. So although it might be BA1 Omicron or BA2 Omicron, which is less severe, the pressure comes onto the medical services and the health facilities, because people will still require, in some cases, hospitalization or treatment from doctors. So the key is not, how bad we get it. The key is how much pressure is going to go onto the health facilities.
But if you look at it, okay, so just now I opened by asking a question like, if you find out you have COVID, what do you do next? And most of us, I even thought about it last night when I was at home. So saying, if I find out I have COVID, do I tell my folks, my friends in the office, my colleagues, my family? What do I do? I think there's just so many questions that people feel guilty to talk about sometimes, simply because you don't want to put someone in a predicament. So I guess, like if you were with someone the night before or a couple of friends and you're positive today, I think the hard part will be telling them, hey guys, I'm positive. Now you guys need to go test. So, well, moving back to what we were talking about just now, endemic mediocrity, I just feel that we are opening up on April 1st, and EIZAZ wanted to talk about opening up to the world also. We need to not be lackadaisical in our attitudes, especially in the service industry. Nigel, you can talk about that. We're going to be looking at opening up hotels again, making sure staff are properly trained, making sure they know first aid. Are we prepped for stuff like this, EIZAZ?
So to take on to Nigel's point just now, I'm comforted in the fact that most of us know roughly what to do in the event that we are faced with COVID or some sort of infectious disease. In the beginning, a lot of the health infrastructure was completely overwhelmed because we ourselves, the people, had no idea what it was. We didn't know where to get help, how to manage this issue. But now there's this huge education out there, through experience, I suppose, that a lot of us know how to self-manage wherever possible. So, and only the serious cases, hopefully, will actually be pushed to the medical infrastructure. And that kind of gives me hope that we are able to weather this, should it go into a direction that we don't that's unenviable for us. Having said that, I really think that the border opening on 1st of April, it would obviously it's a good move, right? Recover the economy. A lot of us have really been looking forward to having the borders open again. But if we take a look at what they're doing in Singapore, and it was really very, very surprising because when the rules came out, the Singapore land borders, we are going to open them completely, fully, for daily commuting, without any pre-departure test, without any on-arrival test, and without any quarantine. If you got
you seem to be having a problem with this. Do you have a problem with this?
Well, I don't have a problem per se, but I'm quite concerned that at least the pre-departure test should be kept at a very minimum, right? Because right now it's just completely open, and I understand why. Because the issue of daily commuting in Singapore to Malaysia is very, very delicate. A lot of people have their jobs there. They work in Singapore, come back to Johor and stay, right? But the removal of the pre-departure test, that was very, very surprising, actually. So when that happens, and the land border crossing is one of the busiest in the world, you have 350,000 people crossing every day. Mm-hmm. So if something were to happen there, I think it could escalate into something very, very large in a very, very short amount of time.
Right. Nigel, what about you? I think for you, it's all systems go at this point, isn't it?
Well, yes and no, Gerard, because look, on one hand, the tourism service sector has been preparing for this for a very, very long time. You know, we've become very wary, you know, of what we need to do in order to encourage the government to consider even opening up the borders. So, you know, up until today, we've actually been putting a lot of processes in place to make sure we can handle people when they do come through our borders. But that being said, maybe a point by Pete earlier on, you know, it's also good that we do have some of these measures in place. And as far as endemicity is concerned, although it's nice to say, hey, we're going to go back to some semblance of normalcy, endemicity should not necessarily mean just forgetting about all the safety and precautions that we've taken over the last 2 years, right? So I don't know, EIZAZ, maybe because of the land, the amount of traffic going through to Singapore by land, they've decided to take the risk and do away with these tests. By air, you still have to do a test 2 days before arrival, right? And there are certain restrictions in place. But the Singapore government has said they're going to review it again in maybe 2 to 4 weeks. So we don't know what's going to happen. So Gerard, all I can say is that while we look forward to it, the tourism sector is still very aware that this could always do a 180. Anything can happen along the way. And right. As far as we're concerned, you know, just be careful and make sure the SOPs are in place. There has to be some restriction.
Right. So in my mind's eye, what I'm picturing is come April 1st, when the borders open, you know, I mean, there's just going to be a max exodus from outside, Malaysians living outside the country to want to come back. So I'm just looking at Malaysians who haven't been back for the longest time. They're going to try to make their way back first. And then, does this really mean that people are going to want to travel again and go visit other countries? Pete, what are you hearing from expats living in the country at this point? You know, like, are families and friends of theirs going to want to make their way back at this point?
Yeah, there is. I mean, there's people here within our community who want to travel without the restrictions, want to be able to come back into Malaysia without the restrictions. There are those that are outside who want to come to Malaysia, you know, as a tourist destination. So the issue really is that there's still a lot of confusion as well around, you know, what vaccines are accepted, what vaccine passport is accepted, and not just for Malaysians going out and for expats going out to other countries, but also coming in and going around ASEAN. So I mean, you know, as we rush to open up and get back on the global stage, we still have to deal with the possibility that, you know, vaccination certificates may not be accepted. And you know, for those that are confronted with this, it's awkward, it's stressful, it's disruptive, it's time consuming, it's very expensive. Right. So we need to have something that's going to sort of conjoin all of the domestic stuff together to allow us to be able to travel in relative freedom, but with a set of agreed processes and procedures. That would make it much easier for us, I think.
Right. So what happens now when someone comes through the airport? Are you given a blue tag or pink tag or whatever? and you're put into your hotel, what will stop you from taking off your tag and just walking out of the hotel? What are these tags for? Maybe EIZAZ, you can walk us through this before we move into Ukraine and how that's going to affect us. Yeah.
Sure. So from my understanding, what happens on April 1st, anybody coming into Malaysia, if you have 2 vaccination shots and you have a pre-departure test, you're allowed into the country. When the moment you enter in Malaysia, you have to fill up a specialized form on your MySejahtera. Everybody must have MySejahtera, it's compulsory. Right? You have to fill up the specialized traveler form. And once you submit it, you have 24 hours to do an on-arrival test in Malaysia. So within that 24 hours of arrival in Malaysia, to avoid jamming up the main entrances, right? You can choose to do it at either hotel, at the airport, or any clinic that you want to. If you fail to do that within 24 hours, I think there are a couple of things that are going on. I think the Minister of Health has said that there could be a chance that will deport you as well. That has been mooted, and I think that's a good way to kind of put some regulation back into movement again. I don't think we're going to open all borders as free as the Singapore-Johor border. that is a unique case.
So I'm going to come back to the COVID-19 impact on our economy, but I want to first seg into what Pete wants to talk about today, global vaccine passports. And I know Nigel will have a lot to say about vaccine passports at this point too. But is this even possible, Pete? Yeah, Pete, did you hear me, Pete?
Global vaccine passports, Gerard. Yeah, it's an issue that we have discussed previously, and it's ongoing. It hasn't been resolved. So one of the things about crisis management is that before you move to the next stage, you have to have the plan in place for that to be implemented so that it is a seamless move and that you meet the objectives. So whatever the mitigations are you put in place have to meet what the objectives are and allow those objectives to be realized. So once again, regrettably, we're actually seeing Malaysians being denied entry to a country because of a lack of formal international agreement on vaccines and vaccine passports. This time in Germany, where Malaysians were turned around as the vaccines they had, Sinovac and the Pfizer BioNTech as the booster, were not recognized by Germany. And this was despite full compliance with entry and airline screening checks and verifications of this before they set off. So this raises a number of concerns. Let's say we've previously highlighted and discussed, and we understand that, of course, it's a personal responsibility to ensure that we are in full compliance with the requirements of the country to which we're travelling. But yet, also, as was the recent case of Malaysians initially refused entry to the Philippines, immigration forces also may continue to operate outdated regulations. So it's still very mixed up. We still have domestic policy that is not being recognized outside or notified outside for us to travel into that country. So it's still very confusing. And one of the things that we talked about was, an ASEAN response, trying to put something together that would allow everybody to be able to travel within ASEAN on agreed standards of vaccine, agreed standards on the app, vaccination certificates, vaccination passport.
Mm-hmm. Nigel, do you want to weigh in very quickly before we move into Ukraine, Russia?
Yeah, I think on the vaccine passport, there has been quite a bit of chatter on finding a standard. And of course, that chatter is the challenge. How do we determine what standards we're going to adopt? Some people are saying, let's use the WHO certificate standards. Some people are saying, no, we've got our own standards that we already adhere to in our local countries. So good news is, I think we're coming to some point where we may actually get recognition of certs for everybody. But I think that's still a work in progress. But if that works out, then at least intra-ASEAN will have a little bit more ease of travel.
But I guess when you look at it, when you look at countries from different continents around the world, the biggest problem will be discrimination. The well-to-do countries or the G20 countries will say, we're not sure if these passports are real or these vaccines are legit. Things like this usually happen. And I want to get back to talking about this now, simply because we have a big problem in our hands. some are saying that, are we looking at World War III? Are we, what's going to be happening with this whole Russia-Ukraine situation? How are we going to be moving forward when we try to open the world and half the supply chain is gone kaput? EIZAZ, maybe we'll wait for Peter to make an appearance again. Till then, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, if you're talking about the global supply chain going kaput, it actually seems Russia's war supply chain has also gone kaput. Yeah. They have not made a lot of progress into Ukraine. It's like almost week 4 of the entire invasion, and it has been very, very. Is it word restraint? There's been a lot of restraint, perhaps, on Russia's side, either intentionally or through infrastructure, because apparently some of the supply mechanisms have not been working very, very well. A lot of the soldiers have been captured, and some of the key witness accounts from those are that there isn't enough food to go around, there isn't enough petrol even for the soldiers. And the Russian supply chain, if you take a look, it goes on for maybe about 30 kilometers at most. And that's how far the invasion has gone on. Mm-hmm. So the sanctions may have played a very, very important role in this for the first time, I think, in world history. We're seeing some really, really strong sanctions on them.
So it's the sanctions you think are actually working. Let's go to Pete. Pete, you beg the question, or you asked the question, are we going to see a World War III? Or at least that's what you wanted to talk about with regards to, or maybe just a nuclear conflict. Sorry about that. But yeah, your thoughts, Pete.
Yeah, I mean, the question that more.
We're still having connectivity problems with Pete. We'll try to get back to him. We'll try to dial you back in. Going back to you, EIZAZ. And Nigel, if you want to weigh in, please weigh in on this one. Yeah.
So I think the sanctions that have been levied were extremely heavy. For the first time, I think Russia is really reeling back.
Yeah, but Pete was saying, Pete did say that the sanctions was like bringing a water gun to a war. So it's actually paying off now, you think?
Initially, yes. I was under the impression that because every sanction that so far that I've seen in my lifetime, right, for Iran, sanctions on North Korea, they just flooded on just well, right?
Right.
There has been no major changes to, for example, Iran's nuclear program, So I was quite skeptical that it will work this time around, but it seems like the global community really did rally and push for something.
So having said that, coming back to travel and tourism, which is now we see as a big thing, a lot of people have lost money around the world simply because tourism and travel has stopped for a while. Now, looking at what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, how is that affecting us with regards to travel and tour and people from these countries making their way in and out of our country? Nigel?
Well, I mean, at the moment, it's still very early to say. We're sort of thankful that the cost of fuel hasn't gone up too much. So, apart from having to reroute flights, we're still okay with the pricing of flights. Everybody's keeping their fingers crossed. But if the fuel prices do go up, then we could see a substantial increase in air ticket prices, which is not going to do very well for tourism or travel recovery, obviously. As for people coming in and out, not really a big question at the moment here in Asia, because there really has been no movement at all. And ever since the COVID pandemic started, so we're still in a bit of a status quo at the moment.
Right. But also another thing I wanted to talk about, which is not in our list of topics today, is I drove around KL yesterday and I couldn't help but notice that many hotels are shuttered, or they're just gone, they're just vanished. Are there any plans or any what do you call it, initiatives being put forward to bring these hotels? A lot of them, like let's say Istana Hotel was a landmark in Kuala Lumpur. That's history now. Are there any plans to revive these hotels, Nigel?
Well, not from the government side, of course. I don't think they could even help us to revive the hotels. So we're going to have to leave it to market forces. But one of the main things that are also impacting whether hotels are going to open, they may not have shut down, but they're not open, is this issue we have with manpower. And of course, recently the announcement of the minimum wage. We're just coming out of an economic crisis, really, for the tourism sector. And now you're slapping on a minimum wage, and coupled with the fact that locals may not even want to work in this industry, and there is no income, and there is no movement of tourists into the country yet. We're at a tipping point, So there are a lot of issues stacked against the hotel industry. And someone needs to come up with some very firm policies and directions in order to really see a recovery.
So what we need at this point is firm policies and directions. That's from you, Nigel. Let's go back to the economy for a bit. We've got about 3 minutes left. EIZAZ, you want to talk about the long COVID-19 impact on our economy?
So I think it's something that we don't talk about enough. We have seen the immediate impact of COVID-19, people not coming to work, businesses shutting down. But as of recent, we've also been seeing some individuals with symptoms that prolong even way after the infection has gone. And it's led to a bunch of some very distressing things like fatigue. I think that's a major part. Fatigue, loss of breath, and interestingly, brain fog. There have been some cases of some neurological damage that's been caused by COVID. And I did some research into it, and I've lost my sense of taste and smell, actually, as of this week. And it's not because of a blocked nose. It's because of the olfactory neurons that are in your nasal, this area here. The virus actually binds to a certain ACE2 type of protein, which is in those neurons, and it disrupts the surrounding cells of it. And what happens is these things cease to function. So you're seeing like indirect nerve damage. And it also attacks some of the other organ parts of the body that have high content of ACE2, namely the kidneys, the hearts, and the lungs. So that is something to be very, very concerned about. In the next 1 year, we may see people coming out of COVID PTSD.
Right. We've run out of time, guys. Thank you very much for doing this. Unfortunately, Peter's got some problems with his connectivity. We'll try to dial in again next week. Nigel, all the best for April 1. We'll definitely be getting some reports from you then. EIZAZ, we'll check in with you next week. Thank you very much, guys. This has been The Nation This Week on Bernama TV. I'm Gerard Ratnam signing off. Have a fantastic weekend.